The Last Line is a completely free podcast, but takes a lot of time, effort, and hard work to make happen. So if you'd like to support the show, then please head over to patreon.com/The Last Line. Thank you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time you're listening to this podcast. My name is James Alban and welcome to episode 20 of The Last Line and part 2 of my conversation with Richard Porter. If you haven't listened to part 1 of this conversation, which was episode 19 of the podcast, then why would you click on an episode that was called part 2? I mean, it's like people who watch the second film in a series before watching the first. It makes me feel a little bit ill. So if you haven't listened to part 1, then please do go and listen to part 1. But equally, if you haven't listened to part 1, you should be able to follow part 2 fairly easily. It's just you're lacking a bit of extra context, and part 1's interesting and entertaining anyway, so you should listen to that as well. If you've listened to part 1, you'll already know who Richard Porter is. I'm sure you know who he is anyway, but he is a motoring journalist, script editor on Top Gear and now the Grand Tour. He is the writer of the book On That Bombshell, which delves into the production of the Top Gear, the 13-year Top Gear run, and all the behind-the-scenes antics that went on and how the show got made. He's also the author of the book How to Be an F1 Champion, which is available in all good bookstores as we speak. And he is also the one half of Sniff and Smith, a YouTube series that he co-makes. That's not a thing. That he makes with fellow motoring journalist Johnny Smith, and he is also the founder of Sniff Petrol, the car website and blog. So without any further ado, let's get back into it with Mr. Richard Porter. We talked about sort of the Reliant Robin sketch and sort of there was the, you know, we have to sort of drip feed information into it to make it feel slightly justified. But, so is there because Top Gear seems like, and the Grand Tour seems like, I don't know how to phrase this without sounding like, well, it seems like you're not really bothered about everyone's opinions. You're just sort of making the show you want to make a lot of the time. I don't know how true that is, and I don't know if I phrase that very well because it makes you sound like you just don't care, which is obviously not true.
No, I mean, I'd say there was a little bit of arrogance in there. I wouldn't deny that. Molly, please stop growling at the chair. Doc, what is wrong with you? So, in fact, that might be someone outside. No, I think it might be someone outside. It's not. She doesn't normally growl at chairs. That would be a new and bizarre development.
I didn't know if it was the ball.
No, don't mention the B word. Unless she's gone nuts. I used to have a friend whose dog used to bark at the oven, her parents' dog, and her mum was French, and the dog spoke French.
Right.
So every time you go, she put the oven on, and the dog was like, rah, 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 rah. You're not, silence, no, you're not playing. It's like yelling at the dog in French. It was incredible. Yes, we were a bit, I mean, I don't know. I suppose we kind of had the courage of our convictions that we thought we were doing the right thing. And then people started watching the show, and that, I suppose, it vindicated that. And then, you know, the show became this ludicrous behemoth, and we ended things sort of, I mean, you know, the popular figure bandied around was like 350 million viewers worldwide or something. And that, I think that's why we used to be deliberately self-deprecating, and we used to work out of crappy places, and we used to sort of try not to become too bloated and pompous, was because it would be a bit easy to do that and to start going, well, you know, we're one of the biggest TV shows in the world, but if you have to go and, you know, make it out of a shabby office at our airfield was particularly manky, and and it was deliberately so, and our exec producer Andy Willman used to be absolutely militant about that. They threatened to put some new carpet in, and he in quite strong terms told them that was not happening, and it was part of his theory, which I think was absolutely right, to keep it all a bit grounded as much as you could. But yes, I suppose didn't care what people thought.
I guess the question I was sort of working towards did the expectations of the audience ever weigh on you, especially like when you were coming out with the Grand Tour? And I don't know which stage you joined the Grand Tour, how sort of set up it already was before you went.
Yeah, it was up and running.
But like, how sort of, you know, are you conscious of?
Well, it's a funny one, because we used to read feedback online. I mean, I did, you know, in the sort of usual places. If you're into cars, and there's a big website called Piston Heads, which has got a very active forum, and they would always dissect the show. There is a website called Final Gear, which is a dedicated Top Gear, Grand Tour, Fifth Gear kind of car telly forum, and there's various other places. And Twitter obviously sort of became a thing while we were making the show, so it was easy to sort of get some feedback. And I suppose as a team, our views on how much you read that varied. Richard couldn't bear to read anything. It just couldn't. It really. He always sort of admitted he wasn't built for it. He just couldn't. Criticism would wound him more than he would like to let on. James used to just, again, this sort of childish, slightly spiteful way that we used to carry on. One of James's ways of winding Richard up, if they were just bored and they were by a computer, was that James would show how he was impervious to criticism by starting to type in his own name to Google, followed by Izza, and then a range of swear words, sort of starting with twat and then building up to the big one, and then hitting return and going, oh, not many there, and then feigning disappointment that no one had called him a C-bomb in Googleable history. And while Hammond sat there going, don't do it, you won't like it, I'm warning you won't like it, because one day it'll come up positive and you'll find something and someone will be horrible to you and it'll really upset you. And James like, no, it doesn't bother me, I quite like it, I'd like it if someone called me it. So that was one extreme, or two extremes of dealing with online feedback. But I mean, I always found it quite interesting. I think because I have my website, Sniff Petrol, I think a couple of times I've done stories on there, kind of slightly mocking the way that a typical discussion on Top Gear would go, which is someone would say, oh, I quite liked it, and someone else would go, what are you talking about? That was awful, it was so scripted. And then someone else would say, well, of course, it's just an entertainment show now, it's not about cars, as if they'd just thought of that and no one else had noticed that, even though that was sort of, been an observation for 10 years, and so it would go on. There were sort of certain ways in which people would always discuss the show, and as long as, I think you could quite easily tell when we got it wrong, because the negatives would vastly outweigh the positives, and generally, I think as well, when you do stuff like that, sometimes you just have this lingering feeling in your gut, something's not good. I mean, sometimes you know something's not good. There's not even a gut feeling. You just know it's shit. We've accidentally made some shit, and it's like that did happen a few times. And I think sometimes when there's other things you sort of go, I'm not sure this is our best work. But then I got a bit of flack. I had a few people. I didn't like the Top Gear special where we went to India. I just thought that the premise was contrived. I thought there was too much setup, and we were asking people to believe that certain things were real when they basically weren't, and it was just all a bit flimsy. And I haven't watched it for years. I
It's
slag
not one
it
of the
off
ones
in
that
the
gets
book.
repeated a lot. Weirdly.
No, although we were staying with some friends last year and their kids had the telly on and it came on, Dave,
right.
and I had to ask them to turn it off because I couldn't bear it. It wasn't I couldn't bear to watch it so much as I also couldn't bear to watch it with other people in the room as well, because I sort of felt if this is as bad as I remember, it's going to be this awkward sort of thing where I'll feel that people will go, have you made this then? And I'll be like, I didn't have much to do with it. But and I sort of knew that was a bit ropey from the off. But then I slagged it off in my book, and I had a few people going, it wasn't that bad, I liked it. And then they were sort of a bit wounded, as if it was like I was kind of, essentially criticising their taste and judgment. It's like, fine, if people liked it, then all were good. But I sort of I had this feeling that was never particularly good. But you can't get too... So what I was going to say is, sort of shenanigans and japes with James and Richard, James Googling himself as a laugh. But Jeremy was I think, used to read online feedback way more than he let on. And sometimes he would let on, but he would oscillate between... Because the classic thing was they'd come in on a Monday after the show had been out on a Sunday night, and they would come in on the Monday morning to the office because we would do the voiceover on a Monday. And Jeremy would come in and if it was the last night's show had been a success, not just in terms of viewing figures, but he'd come in and go, right, he'd go, Final Gear, love last night's show, and he'd be full of beans, and then sometimes he'd be like, well, we really pissed off Final Gear there, but then sometimes it was almost like he'd make it seem like that was a sport, so it's like we've got to, we can't just appease the fan base, was his logic. And another one of his little sort of mottos was, your biggest fans are also your harshest critics. He was like, I remember him going, look, if you went to a Led Zeppelin forum, the ones who are really nitpicking about Led Zeppelin 4, the album, and the ones who are the hardcore fans because they're obsessed, and it's the same with us. And it's like, are you comparing us to Led Zeppelin? That's really weird. But he had a point, The people who love you the most. That was one of the things I did on my website. It was a sort of spoof column for an American Top Gear fan, because it seemed like a lot of time the American fans were particularly sort of devoted. I think because it was like a little bit of a, it's an obscure show over there. It wasn't on broadcast TV. You had to seek it out, so it felt like you were in this sort of little club. And so it felt special, I guess, and something that you bond people together. But then they seemed to feel very let down when we didn't deliver what they wanted. And I did this thing on Sniff Petrol, this spoof guy going, I hated this season. It was awful. It was almost as bad as season 8, which I also hated. Why can't they make it more like season 10, which I hated? Jeremy seized on this when I published it, and he used to do that a lot. Yeah. He would just repeat bits of that back to me, just going, oh, he's one of those people who wants us to make it more like season 11, which they also hated. And there was a little bit of that, the hardcore fan base wanted perfection from us and wanted, I don't know, I mean, so the thing is, one person's idea of a perfect show, like a perfect song or a perfect album, will be different from another's, but they both claim to be fans, so you could tie yourself in knots trying to please everyone. Yeah. And so we did have to have the courage of our convictions to some extent. There's an interesting one in the Grand Tour. When I started in the office, the first script I saw, which had already been written and which was ready to go and shoot, I think that week, was the thing we put out in the second episode of the first series, where they went to this military training range in Amman. And now, in terms of scriptedness, that was mega scripted. Yeah. That was pretty much. I mean, it was. I was going to say it's scripted like a movie. It wasn't. There was leeway to ad lib, and it's got one of my favourite ad libs in it when James has shot all the passengers on the plane, dummy passengers. And when he's suddenly becoming really Republican and about the lookalike of the Queen and stuff, and so there were quite some ad libs in that. But that show went down really badly because it was so different to anything we'd done, and it was so obviously set up, and it had no cars in it until the second half. And people hated it.
It was a sort of a weird one, but the thing with, I think, like, do you think that would have gone down better? Or it might have gone down worse, conversely. But do you think it would have gone down better if it was in the first episode? of the Grand Tour? So it's like we're going to just do more of this sort of stuff.
Well, that's the thing. It was never going to be the first episode because that was always going to be those 3 hypercars because that was sort of unfinished business from the old show. And also, we used to put quite a bit of thought, and Andy Willman, our producer, particularly, used to agonise over this. The sequencing of a series, what you put where. And it's changed a bit, but sort of pre-iPlayer, when we were doing Top Gear, you would put a strong but not your best show as the first programme of a new series, on the basis that you wanted to come back swinging, but you didn't want to waste good material, or the best material, on the first show, because we always assumed not everyone was watching, they'd have forgotten it was on. I mean, iPlayer obviously changes all that, and Amazon, it's like it's on demand, but that was the logic back then, and that was it. So we would sort of, I mean, I'd be, I don't know that whether in the new Top Gear they still subscribe to that theory. It is hard to sequence series. We definitely wanted to put those hypercars out first episode of the first Grand Tour, because that was a fan base move. That was settle people down, settle on the basis that our hardcore, the nucleus of our fan base has always been car fans. They came first. And though we might have tried their patience and pissed them off a little bit over the years, we hope that they're still sort of, the car fans are still there, because it's almost habit and they'll stick with us. And every so often we have to, acknowledge that. And so it was like, let's settle people down with solid, absolutely solid, like comfort food. It's 3 amazing cars. It's on a track. The presenters are on good form. There's a bit of the back and forth and they're jipping each other, but fundamentally this is quite a car-y show. But then let's show that this will be something different in the second episode. So, and in retrospect, that was too
soon.
If we'd have buried it further down the run, I think people would have gone, okay, this is mostly business as usual.
Yeah.
But occasionally they're just going to do something a bit spiky and a bit unusual.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But when you put it show 2, I think it freaked people out a little bit. But I remember getting the script for it. The director, the guy who's directing it, showed it to me. He said, Jeremy's written this. He's happy, he's signed it off, it's something he's wanted to do. So I didn't even ask Jeremy about it, I think, because the director, I don't think he wants anything changing on this. I've kind of blocked it all out to shoot it now, so, don't muck it up. I remember reading it and going, this is fucking nuts. He's lost his mind. What is he doing here? I mean, this is just self-indulgent nonsense. Why are we doing this? Which I said to the director, and the director went, I think it'll be good. And I was like, do you? Well, I don't. But I'm not going to, I just started back, and I was like, I'm not going to rock the boat. And that item, when it turned out, I really, really liked it.
Right.
Again, it's one of those ones where you have to ask the viewer to accept it's going to be a certain thing.
Yeah.
This will not be very car-y at all, and this will obviously be quite structured and set up. But it's those 3 idiots that you quite like.
Yeah.
Where what say you just roll with this one and see where it goes, and I think that was the thing. It was too unexpected that people just went, what are you doing? Why would you do this? And
I wonder if going back and watching it, because I've only seen it once when the episode
well, I was going to say,
I wonder if
going
going back and watching it again.
If you watched it again, I wonder if you could well just go, no, it is still dog shit. But it's funny enough. It's one of the ones that because I used to have to watch the films over and over because I would be doing the voiceover and sort of tweaking all that and putting time codes in and stuff, and then I used to have to watch everything on the Grand Tour again because we did this thing called X-Ray. You can get trivia up on screen on your Amazon device, and so I'd have to watch the whole shows again. So I used to watch stuff over and over again, and it was always a mark to my mind of how good a film was if I could bear to watch it again, or if I was like by the final watching to do the X-Ray, I was just like, oh god, it's this bit again, I can't bear it. And I really enjoyed rewatching that one. I just thought it was funny and silly, but yeah, it's a bit weird. I'll be honest, I sort of thought maybe, having got my head around it, that maybe on the Grand Tour we would do a little bit more of that we would do a bit more kind of randomness and things that people didn't see coming. But I think that we got so stung by the reaction to that one.
Because that's what it was sort of suggesting, I think, by especially, like you said, by putting it so early, is that it is sort of suggesting, like, well, it's not always going to be that car thing that you're necessarily. I don't think there were cars in it eventually.
They then got a Audi S8 as a getaway car.
Yeah.
And there was a lorry. Yeah, there was a lorry. I mean, that's the thing. It was hardly a car review, though. Certainly compared to as well three hypercars zooming about, where they're talking about lap times and things. So, I suppose that is. I mean, excuse me. But back to your original point about sort of courage of convictions. I suppose that's an interesting example of having courage of convictions and going, we're going to do this. People won't see it coming. It's totally unexpected. It's not something we've done before, but hey, let's try it.
Yeah.
And having that confidence that we could get away with it, but then actually sort of retreating from it afterwards because the reaction was so generally negative. Even though, and we've all agreed, and I've talked to the presenters about this subsequently, and we've all agreed, and Jeremy particularly, it's like we really like that film.
All right.
So we've sort of got still that sort of courage that we did the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like I said, I thought on paper it seemed like it was ludicrous, but it sort of had something in the final cut that I think we got away with it. But we did retreat from that sort of thing. So obviously, I hope that shows we weren't so completely arrogant that we just went, well, they're all wrong. Everybody's wrong. I think if you look on Amazon, each show has a rating.
Yeah.
I think that's got the lowest rating of anything we ever did on the Grand Tour in the first 3 series.
But it's interesting, like, that you did sort of rein it back a bit afterwards because, like, you didn't. I don't know. It's never seemed like the kind of thing you guys do is like, and obviously I'm not privy to all the behind the scenes stuff, so it probably happens a lot more than I think. But especially when you get into like the area of like controversy and stuff like that, you would never a show to be like, "No, we're really sorry that we offended you there." There was
we probably should have been a few more times a little bit more contrite. I don't know, but I think one of the misconceptions about Top Gear in its heyday was the sort of deliberate attempts to be controversial, and there really weren't. It was sort of. I mean, I don't want to say it was always Jeremy, but it was very often Jeremy. And of course there was that whole thing with Mexico, which was actually Richard. And I think a lot of that was a really weird.
So was it
thing.
Actually Richard, or was
who
it
said the controversial?
Yeah, it was Richard who said it. But was it? Was that? I mean, I don't want to put your head on the floor, but like, was it like scripted beforehand, or was that like a sort of strange ad-libby moment?
It was, so the way that we used to write the news segment was we would sit in a room with a load of press releases spread out on the floor and newspaper cuttings, and we would just try and come up with stuff we wanted to talk about. And there was this press release about this new Mexican sports car. And sort of from there, the way we used to write it was, sort of someone would pick something up. I mean, that's how the Dacia Sandero thing started. James genuinely just picked up this press release about Dacia Sandero, started reading it, saw it was a little bit boring, and just to get the attention in the room went, "Hey everyone, I've got some good news here," and everyone stopped and went, "What is it?" And he went, "The Dacia Sandero is going to be available with a 1.2 litre engine," and that's how that came about, as a lot of the news things did. So, although they were scripted in as much as stuff was written down, we would usually write the news as it was bullet points. So they could glance down and see a bullet point, which was practically, it would just be sort of, here's the price of this car you're talking about, because you want to get some information in there. But then it would also, have sort of, to varying degrees of detail, the kind of gag points you wanted to hit. But they would come from ad-libs in the room. And part of my job was that I would just write everything down and then take it away and type it up and try and refine it. So, sometimes they're like, the elements will be there, but they need restructuring, or it would just need, a bit of the fat chopping off. And that one, we started talking about this Mexican car, and Richard said sort of a version of what he said on the TV, but
which for anyone listening who didn't know, it was like,
I can't remember what he said about.
I think it's that them being lazy, or there'll all be a slip. No one will be watching it. none from the Mexican embassy were watching anyway because they're probably asleep.
I think did Jeremy say that a bit? He might have said
maybe.
that a bit.
And then there was something about their food as well. I think.
Yeah. See, that was I did write that bit, but I wrote. I'll tell you why I wrote that bit. My wife is American. She's from the southwestern US, and of course, Mexican food is huge in that part of the US, particularly. And I don't particularly like Mexican food.
Yeah.
Although she sort of forced me to try it more. I do like some things, but in any given situation, what sort of food should we go for tonight? Mexican would be pretty low down my list, if I'm honest. And there was an Alexi Sale gag from years ago where he went, you don't buy Mexican food, you rent it, it's just sick with cheese on it. And I think I said that in a room, and that became the thing about food. And then I remember saying we should definitely leave the bit about food in, and I was only doing that to annoy my wife because I knew we'd be watching the show that Sunday evening, and she'd go, "Oh, you bastard! You've got your bloody obsession with Mexican food in here. Why won't you admit it's delicious?" But the thing that Richard said was he said it in the room in a sort of. Well, he didn't say. I think he didn't say as much as he said on the show. And he said it in a sort of lighter tone that somehow it was less, I don't know, it didn't feel as obnoxious.
Right.
And it certainly didn't, I didn't sort of think, oh dear, we're going to tone this down. I just thought, okay, well, it's all a bit. Because apart from the else, after it all kicked off, and it was sort of the, basically it was stereotyping, which, fair enough, it was. And, in retrospect, we probably should have stayed away from the whole thing, but there we are. After it all kicked off, a friend of mine sent me a picture of a packet of Tesco own brand tortilla chips. And on the front at the time, it had a depiction of a man in a massive sombrero asleep under a tree. And it just went, you're not the only ones doing this. And I was like, oh, bloody hell, Tesco are doing the same thing. Because if that's not stereotyping, then I don't know what is. And but the way Richard delivered it on the show, I think that's the thing. He sort of he amped it up, as they would often do. Take the bare bones of what they were going to say, but then with the adrenaline of being on stage in front of a big crowd, everything got bigger. And his delivery sort of, I think, got kind of angrier almost, and that made it feel quite brutal and aggressive, and it just it wasn't just a sort of light-hearted bit of poking fun. It actually sort of felt like we were into full xenophobia, and it wasn't very nice. And it was weird. It was just a thing, on the day. And the line, the biggest irony was that Jeremy went, "Oh, the Mexico ambassador won't be watching; he'll be asleep." The Mexican ambassador was watching. He didn't normally watch. He just happened to be watching, I'll see what all the fuss is about with this bloody show everyone's always talking about. What? But we did apologise for that, and the Mexican ambassador turned out to be a really lovely bloke, and he invited the presenters and our producer, Andy, to the Mexican ambassador's residence for a drinks reception at lunchtime. And I think Richard and Andy went, I think. Did Jeremy go as well, maybe? But Andy came back to the office afterwards and he was absolutely rat-faced. He'd just been drinking tequila all afternoon. He came back and he got his bottle. Still got it on my shelf up there. It was a really nice bottle of tequila, which he was given. And Andy came back and he went, "Do you want this? I really like tequila." And I was like, "Are you sure? Because you seem to have had quite a lot of it." But yeah, the Mexican ambassador was a lovely man and was very gracious in the end and just went, "Accept your apology, come and have a drink at my place and we'll all be friends again." And we were. So in that way, that sort of makes me feel better about it. He's the official envoy to the United Kingdom for Mexico. So if he says we're sort of off the hook and he's forgiven us, I hope that means that the people of Mexico have. I still don't particularly care for the food, but that's just my personal
It is weird
taste.
how when I first watched that, whenever it was, I don't know how long ago that was, but I didn't really see what the fuss was about, and then I saw it again recently on YouTube. I just stumbled across it on YouTube, and it didn't bother me a lot. But then I'm not Mexican, so I don't, but it I don't know if I'd changed or just the way everything is now. It seemed.
I think there's probably a little bit of. Well, the two are probably linked, aren't they? It makes me a bit uncomfortable now. I don't remember putting my hand up and going, guys, we should not do this at the time, because it didn't seem to be that bad. And so times have changed. I mean, I can't remember when that was, but it does seem, it's one of the things that will, a friend of mine, a guy who I used to work with on the show, I was talking to him about this the other week, and he went, one day, Top Gear, and not that far in the future, Top Gear will seem as dated as the black and white minstrel show, or one of those sort of 70s sitcoms that's just basically racist. And he was like, that's what will date the show, because there are things that were said and done in the programme that are rapidly becoming, where once they were sort of slightly unacceptable, but you could get away with it, they will just be seen as absolutely unacceptable. And I think that's part of the evolution of society, and I don't object to it. There's that sort of thing about political correctness gone mad.
Yeah.
And you sort of go, well, yes, but if you change the words political correctness to politeness, and it's just polite to not be nasty to people who aren't like you, then it's a bit easy to understand that there is room for political correctness, or however you want to call it, and it's just good manners. Just be nice to people.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't say that at the time, so I was guilty as anyone of being a massive hypocrite on this. But it does date the show. I do think attitudes have changed. I got some on the other month. I wrote a column in the magazine that I write for about F1 getting rid of grid girls, and saying, this is about time, because F1 is, and I'm a big F1 fan, but I find there's something embarrassing about it. I think F1's a bit naff. It's a sort of middle-aged dad sport, isn't it? They pretend it's all high-tech and glamorous. And look, there's people on yachts wearing beautiful Rolexes and things. It's not. It's your dad in chinos after a big roast, sitting in his armchair watching this thing. And so there's something sort of terminally naff about it. And the new owners of the sport are trying to change that around. And there are lots of arguments about having women in tight clothes on the grid and why you should or shouldn't, but I think fundamentally you get rid of it and it just suggests that you're moving with the times. And I put this in a column, and someone went, I don't know why you're getting on your high horse. I seem to remember you worked on the Top Gear when you had women in bikinis in the studio to illustrate different kinds of Porsche 911. And I thought, oh God, we did, didn't we? That was in 2002 or 3, I think. And I mean, we wouldn't do that now. It's funny, because we just absolutely wouldn't. I know we wouldn't, partly because there's one thing, and it seems funny to say it, because Jeremy particularly is often accused of being sexist. And you go, that sexist, racist pig, Jeremy Clarkson, people sort of spitting on Twitter and things like that. And I go, it's funny, because one of the things that Jeremy is absolutely neurotic about being perceived as, and will do everything to make sure that he never is sexist. He's really sort of...
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's quite sensitive about it, and he hates... I once had someone who was working with us, a woman who's working on our team, and she said something like, I don't like it when you do those sexist bits. And he went, and he sort of got up on his haunches and went, what sexist bits? She went, I don't really know. And he went, no, go on, which bits have been sexist in the show? What's sexist? Yeah. And she went, I was like, well, that's a good point, I can't really think of any. And he's like, exactly, because there aren't. There aren't. That's the thing. You think there are.
Yeah.
People are sort of, it's like looking at a light bulb and then looking away. You can still see it in front of your face. People have this sort of ghostly outline of unacceptable 70s spec behaviour because it's Jeremy and he's an old warhorse, and of course he's going to be a sexist. And actually, genuinely, I don't think he is. And he's quite careful about that. That he wants to make it absolutely clear that he's not, and he doesn't. Because that's the thing. I remember once working on another show where they were trying to pitch this battle of the sexes thing, and this was about 10 years ago. And I just remember going, it's not 1974. Come on, we're better than this. And we would never really. I mean, we did a thing. It was an awful item. We did in very early days of Top Gear, where it was, can a rally crew change like a gearbox faster than a group of women can get ready for a night out?
Right.
And Jeremy had nothing to do with that. And I remember he was a bit like, what the fuck is this? It was Andy Willman's idea. I think he thought it was funny, and Hammond presented it. And it was an item that was never going anywhere. But yeah, I think Jeremy going, this is not what we should be doing. And that was in the early days as well, when we did have women in bikinis in the studio to illustrate different types of Porsche 911, which, back to my point about, someone was giving me a bit of stick about that. And I was sort of like, but my only defence was times change. That seemed okay there.
There's a lot,
and it was done tongue in cheek as well, I should add. But we probably wouldn't even go there now. We wouldn't. I just don't think we would, because it would. I mean, it was tacky. It would be particularly tacky now.
There's a lot of things that you watch, like that were made not that long ago, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure you'd be able to do that now, or people wouldn't like, and even like really small things. I don't think. Like I was watching Shaun of the Dead. Yeah. The other day, which, I love Shaun of the Dead. It's a great film.
Yeah.
But there is a bit where Nick Frost like purposely crashes his car so he can drive Bill Nye's Jag that's on there.
Right. Yes.
And he's standing outside the. Signpost gone in to get his mum and Bill Nye out, and he stood by the car, and he goes. I'll say it now for the purposes of us talking, but I'll probably cut it from the film. But he goes, "What's up, my niggas?" as he stands by the car.
Oh.
And Sean gives him like a withering look.
Yeah.
But like, I just thought when it came up, I didn't go, ooh. But I just thought you probably wouldn't put that in the scripts now.
No.
In like this,
you just wouldn't, would you? It's not. I know where that would have come from. It's like because it's the character, and he is being inappropriate. Yeah, and the other characters acknowledge this and all that, but at the same time, it's just not a pleasant thing to hear a fat white man say, even when in character. And it's funny. I was watching some old episodes of Fawlty Towers recently, and there's a bit in that where I think Basil basically hits Polly, and it really made me wince. I just went, "Oh my! I mean, you can't do that." And there's a few bits in there. I mean, that show's 40 odd years old, and it does. That's the thing. Times changes. It's it's one of those. It's a mark of the fact that our society is evolving in hopefully the right direction. Yeah. We are more thoughtful. We are more sensitive to other people. I don't think that sort of what kind of tedious right-wing bores on Twitter would call snowflake behaviour. It's just human decency. Yeah. And I suppose going back to my former job on Top Gear, that stuff got through the net that probably shouldn't have done, and that wouldn't now. Yeah. It was different times. I mean, like I say, it was only what 4 years ago at the end, but even so, we probably did get away with a lot more. Bear in mind that pretty much everything had to go through BBC editorial policy. Yeah, well, that's the thing with the Joe Brand thing at the moment as well, isn't it? With the joke she made about acid relating to politicians. It's like, well, someone at the BBC checked it and signed that off and said that's fine. The great thing, there was a fantastic lady in editorial policy called Sue who used to check all our stuff, and after a few controversies, we were told that she had to have eyes on everything. Right. Like, more so, often we would go and film scripts, and then she would review the finished show. And suddenly it was like, Sue has to be in on this earlier. But she was great, because I think some people in that position, their default would be, I need to minimise risk as much as possible. Apart from anything else, there's that sort of that way of thinking, which is, I need to make sure I don't get into trouble. Yeah. So I will. That's my primary aim, not to stop them getting in trouble. It's about me saving my own arse. And Sue wasn't like that. Sue's primary aim was to try and allow us to make the programme the way we wanted to make it. And she was and she wasn't afraid to go, no, you can't say this, or you shouldn't say this, or, sometimes she'd even send me a cheeky little note where she'd just go, I really like this bit, but what about that? And I remember there was something in where we put some swearing in or something, which we didn't normally do. And she sent me a note and she went, well, you could probably get away with this. And I hope you do, because it really made me laugh. And I was like, you couldn't ask for anything more from a poll person than to feel that like they're on your side. They've got one eye on standards and practices, as the Americans call it, but they are hoping, wherever possible, to preserve what you've come up with, because they appreciate that you'll it's also you develop a relationship with someone like that they know that you're not doing these things lightly.
Yeah.
If you're sort of saying, can we get away with this because we really think it's important to the item, and she would, give it her due consideration. And that was so. A lot of the things that, including, there are a couple of ones which I thought were really unfortunate, and one that I really didn't like, and I don't know what was going on. It was, I don't want to sound like I'm, absolving myself of blame, but it was not my department, and it was something that made it to air that shouldn't have done. And I was amazed that Ed Poll, which might not, I think it might be someone different at this point. And it was also in an era when the whole layers of management were scrutinising everything we did, and it got through, and then it all kicked off. And I just thought, all right, we should look at our shoes and say sorry, because we shouldn't have done that. But where are all these people in management who suddenly scatter like rats?
I think that bit's in the book, isn't it?
There's a bit of it, I think, in the book. I can't
you just
remember
sort of, you offhand comment on it, I think.
Yeah. There was.
It's the thing I'm thinking of, I think.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of them. But, we didn't,
But then there were also controversies that were really unfortunate. Like the whole thing about Jeremy with the eeny, meeny, miny, mo thing.
Yeah.
And it was that wasn't supposed to be seen. And he'd clearly done that take, gone, no, that's not right, and done a different take.
Yeah.
That's
the thing. He
self-policed
himself there, because he realised that even though obviously he'd not said that word, he had mumbled to the same rhythm as it, and even that is not acceptable. So he did the other take and put a different word in altogether. But that was somebody leaked that from our edit suite. We had a pretty good idea who, but we couldn't prove it, and they didn't work for us. In fact, they'd left the country, so it was pretty hard to make that one stick. And that was one of those instances. It was when things weren't, our relationship with the BBC was not good. They were pretty disappointed with us for various things. But what was frustrating there was that their first thought was to give us another bollocking. And we were sort of going, we've had a leak from an edit facility, and I think if that's something that's happening, a lot of other presenters should be worried as well, because you just can't imagine all manner of tantrums and unprofessionalism and amateurism that would be captured on raw footage that, it stays for good reason locked in edit suites. And all of those classic things, where someone's saying things they shouldn't on a hot mic, and a lot of that is just, it gets locked away in edits or destroyed or what have you. And the BBC seemed to be deeply worried that Top Gear was out of line again, rather than there been a sort of major security breach of the kind that any broadcaster should be really concerned about. So, we were a bit, at that point, I think that strained the relationship even more.
Yeah.
Sort of like, guys, ultimately we are one of your shows on your network, and we are actually on the same side. I know that we piss you off a lot, and that's fair enough, but can we pull together on this one? We should be presenting a unified front. And they were more like, oh, he's done it again, we're so sorry. Sort of, I think part of the terrible situation the BBC finds itself in is that because it's Molly.
What's wrong with you now?
What is this? One of the terrible situations the BBC finds itself in is because it's sort of fairly constantly under attack from certain quarters of the media. It is very sensitive about its public perception. It has become more sensitive, and so certainly with Top Gear, in fairness, we had blotted our copybook a few times, so they were less willing to stand by us when maybe they would have done if it was our first offence, and that sort of made it hard. And also in a funny way, this is ultimately what led to the downfall of the Clarkson, Hammond and May era show, because the backstory to what happened with Jeremy when he hit our colleague Gosheen is that he was under an enormous amount of pressure in a number of ways. And it's sort of, he's written about this, it's on public record. He was going through a divorce, but also he was getting a lot of flack from all quarters, the BBC management, and particularly the former head of the channel kept sort of calling him in to tell him off again. And I think he just had enough. And it was really starting to affect him. It was really getting him down, that he felt he wasn't being supported by the very place that he had sort of delivered a successful show to. And that was part of why he was a bit frayed at the edges. You know, doesn't excuse what he did, but I think there's a more complex backstory to it than people might appreciate. And
I think some people just assume he was just being a massive diva and just
but
it's like he's worked on a show for however long it ran for. He's not just gonna punch someone just because he didn't get the meal he wanted or whatever it was that.
That's it. I mean, it's just sort of become a big thing about he couldn't have a steak, and it does make him sound like a sort of bad facsimile of Mariah Carey, but no, I'm sure she's ever hit anyone. But it was a sort of the culmination of a lot of crap that was going on at the time. And the funny thing is as well that often sort of seems to get misreported or misinterpreted is this idea that ultimately the BBC sacked him. And the truth of it is that they were just coming to the end of their contracts, all three presenters, and they were in the middle of renegotiating. I think they'd sort of got to a point where the negotiations had reached a satisfactory point, where they were ready to sign. And then he hit one of our team, and that cannot be allowed to pass. But if he'd been under an ongoing contract, they could have suspended him for a bit. Because he was just about to go out of contract. The last thing they could do, particularly mindful of what I was saying about the BBC and its fear of being perceived as misusing license fee, pays money and all the rest of it, the last thing they could do is hand him, because the new contracts apparently were significantly more lucrative than the old ones, so it would have been like, right, so you've done something that's totally unacceptable in the workplace, here, have a 7-figure salary. And so they couldn't do it. So in fact, the only option they really had was to let him go. That's the thing. It wasn't the sacking, they just didn't renew his contract. Because they couldn't. And that doesn't ever really sort of get acknowledged, but it was they were in a really difficult position there, because I suspect, and particularly with pressure from the commercial part of the organisation that sold the show around the world, they would have dearly loved to have found some way to, keep it going, suspend him for a bit, send him off to sort his head out, which is what he did off his own bat anyway, and then he could come back, say he was sorry, and we could crack on. But it just could never happen that way. So but everything happens for a reason, I suppose, doesn't it? And it all ended up okay. And now and it was funny when the Grand Tour started, and then Top Gear was going through sort of reinvention. And you sort of hear kind of long-term fans of the show and car people going, as if you had to make a choice, you had to nail your colours to the mast. It's not football match. It's not even Blur and Oasis. This is like you can watch both. What's happened is people who like light-hearted shows about cars on telly now have more choice. Yeah, you can watch them all, and that's no bad thing. And
and also it allowed for that like amazing opening to the first episode of the Grand Tour, which was incredible.
There's another thing where a lot of stuff over the years that we did was a nice sort of collaborative effort, and it's like I always thought it was a little bit like being in a band, in as much as it's sort of like I've got to choose a band carefully here so that I don't sound like, don't say the Beatles. He's just compared Top Gear to the Beatles. What a prick. But if you imagine sort of a really good, I don't know, Blur or something like that, and you kind of go, well, it's obvious that Damon Albarn is the guy who pulls that band along. In the same way, it's like obvious that Jeremy is the sort of big guy in this one. But every other member of the band brings something, and it wouldn't be the same if you took one element away. And a lot of what we did was very collaborative. But every so often, Jeremy would just have an idea, a vision in his head. And the thing I was talking about with the military training base in the Middle East was one of those. I think that was something he'd formulated in his head, popped out, fully formed. That's what he wanted to do. And that opening sequence was another one of those. That was his vision. Right. That's what he wanted from the off. And I remember, even down to the music.
Yeah.
And he told someone on the team about it. I think our series director, Phil. And Phil was a bit like, okay, yeah, right. And then I think we called a meeting. And there were a few of us in there. So there's me and our series producer and our exec producer and Phil, the director, and Jeremy, and maybe Rich and James were there as well. And Jeremy sat everyone down and he went, right, no, look, I'm just going to explain this to you all now because I've told Phil about it and he's pulling a face. I'm going to tell you all what I want to do now so everybody knows we're all on the same page. And I remember him playing the song off his phone, the Hot House Flowers version of, what was it? I Can See Clearly Now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And even like he was doing sort of live describing visuals over the track, and even to the point where he'd worked out because in fact there's an edit of the song they cut out a little bit to just tighten it up. This is the bit now. I'm coming out of the BBC office. It's almost like Alan Parsons describing the titles to Spy Who Loved Me, but better than that. He's going, okay, now there's the Mustangs. They're driving along. So right, cut this bit out. Okay, now come to here and we this and this. And he was going, and we all sat there and went, okay, yeah, got it. And then sort of the track finished. He went, right, that's what I want to do. And normally in those situations, we'd start going, okay, that's good. What if you did this? What if you did that? And we started doing that. And he went, no, you don't understand. This is how I see it. This is how I see it. Okay, we don't need to do anything else. This is how I see it. And we kind of all went, okay, all right, then. Yeah, that's what you think. And I remember we went out and one of the guys I worked with went, is this a bit self-indulgent? And I was like, I don't know. I think, it'll be all right. I think it'll be all right. And I think it was all right. I mean, I really liked it. I got a bit misty eyed the first time I watched the cut.
I thought it was brilliant. It was
great fun to do. We had a lovely time out there. I mean, you know, sort of the turning up and seeing all these cars out in the desert for the first time. And we had a bit of free time, and I turned up with the presenters. We all arrived together and for the first to have a look at the set and everything. And we just spent like an hour just wandering around these cars, just having a look at all this cool shit. And then they all went off and they started filming a lot of the just establishing shots and things. And we got a highway. We got the main sort of, I can't remember the number of it, the freeway from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Closed. But it's amazing how you can close stuff in America. You just pay the police and they go and close stuff. And they were great, because they're used to it, because they run movies and all sorts. And so, just in brief chunks, they just did a rolling roadblock and we got a free section of freeway just to do these shots. And I was riding in the back of one of the camera cars just going, this is fucking nuts. How are we doing this? And then we went back and we did the thing on the stage and there's all these people. And then the fighter jets going over was a really lucky chance that there was an air show up the road and we found out that this display team was there. And I think for sort of a fairly minimal fee, they agreed to just do sort of 2 flyovers or 3 flyovers and which, we couldn't have hoped for any more, because it was like, even Jeremy with his grand vision didn't say, and then some fighter jets will fly over, because I think even he would have known that was ridiculous. His idea was always grounded in what was achievable. And it turned out quite well. And it was a great example of the fact that, apart from anything else, Jeremy's sort of annoyingly right. He has got a good, an incredibly good editorial sense and a good idea of how things should look and how they should be paced and structured and things like that. And there have been plenty of times where I've disagreed with him on stuff, but irritatingly, a lot of time he's been right. Yeah. I mean, not always. I've had occasional times when I've been able to go, that didn't work, did it? No, but whatever. It did work. You know it didn't work, did you? No, I don't. It's good. And there's an awful one we did with the Sweeney movie. Do you remember that? And we made a car.
Yeah, I'd made a note of that because you talk about it.
I hated that so much. And it was for various reasons, which I talked about in the book. Molly, what is your dog problem? She's like a person, because as she gets older, she makes more random grunting noises and things, which I find I do as well. I hated that Sweeney thing so much because it took up so much effort for a precious little reward. I thought it just wasn't a very good item. That was one of those ones where we're sort of asking people to believe we were really doing this, and it was all rubbish. Although we did have another unit with another director, one of our directors, making the real car chase. Which they did a good job, but it was. I hated that so much.
I imagine it must have been quite hard to get through the BBC, because it sounds like...
Oh, it was a nightmare. It was an absolute
Because it does seem like you're just promoting the Sweeney film.
It was almost pulled at the last minute because of that, because the BBC went, this is like BBC Editorial Guidelines 101, don't promote stuff.
It's a bit
randomly.
like Alan Partridge pointing at his Rover V test.
Yes. It was a bit like that, but then you get into a very weird area there, because it's like, well, are we technically, or were we promoting cars that we reviewed? If we concluded by going, this car is great, and of course you can justify that because you are being journalistic about it. If you're reviewing something, you're weighing up the pros and cons. No money's changing hands, but even things like some of the US newspapers, when they don't let their car reviewers go on car events that are paid for by the manufacturer.
Right.
Where Toyota would say, want to fly people to Palm Springs to have a go in the new Camry. I think like the New York Times and places like that, they'll go, no, we'll pay for our people to get there. We will pay for the hotel and pay for their meals as well. And if any other expenses, we will reimburse you. We do not take a dollar from you because that compromises our impartiality. And the Beeb is towards that end of the spectrum, but there's a grey area, and it's like, as long as you're being journalistic about it. But the Sweeney film, management almost went no, quite close to the filming time, and I was going, yeah, go management, because I already thought this is crap. But that was one of those ones where after the act, Jeremy knew I hated it, and he, again, sort of it being childish and belligerent as we all were to some degree, he would go, I think it's one of the best things we've ever done. And he knew I knew that he was talking shit. And I would then dig into the opposite position, because I didn't like that film at all. But it's the worst thing. I heard someone who watched it and it actually gave him tuberculosis because it was so bad. And it got ridiculous. And then he would sometimes just randomly go, I was talking to a friend of mine the other night, and his favourite thing we've ever done, it's The Sweeney. He said it was brilliant, and he's told 100 other people to watch it. So it's definitely a great film. And I'd be like, yeah, well, I heard someone who died because they watched it, and it just got stupid. I think he actually knew that it was not our finest hour, but...
You said that there was one thing I heard you on that podcast I was listening to. You said about when they were trying to do the American show, there was the difficulty about advertisement, and that if you said, like, oh, the Dodge is better than the Ford.
Yeah.
Like, it was a drag race between the
Yeah,
Dodge.
we did a pilot for US Top Gear for the Discovery Network, I think it was. And yeah, they let us get on with it, but then there was a drag race between a Ford and a Dodge, and I think the Dodge won, or anyway, whichever one lost, they spent a lot of money with us.
Yeah.
They didn't want to piss off an advertiser. And they made us pull the drag race, and we were like, but it's a drag race, it's factual, we didn't cheat it.
Yeah.
That car is a little bit faster than that car, they just wouldn't have it. And at that point, we kind of knew that particular pilot was sunk. It was never going to work if we weren't allowed a little bit of freedom. That was always a bit tricky. Doing the US ones. I mean, there are a number of reasons why the US one sort of was a struggle to get. And I think there was a period where the version with Rutledge, Tanner, and Adam had hit its stride. And it hit its stride because they became mates. They were three strangers.
Yeah.
And it turns out they actually did have a really good chemistry. And they were
quite good together.
Yeah, they're still mates now. They're not making the show, and they're still friends. Like, it's actually quite sweet that they're buddies, and they talk to each other, and it's still to this day. And which is, they all live in different parts of the US, so that's not, it would be easy for them to all just have disappeared off to their respective other lives. But I think that show did finally hit its stride, but it took a bit of refinement. The studio didn't make any sense to them relative to the VT, was one of their problems, and just because there's no precedent for that kind of thing in US broadcasting, for a host to be in the studio introducing themselves in the field. It's funny how actually, if you think about it, that is a bit strange.
Yeah.
But I suppose in British TV we're used to it. We all grew up on Blue Peter, which would do that all the time. A studio show that presenters link to their own VTs is sort of normal. Here, there's no precedent.
It's like Adam Buxton was saying, they don't really do like comedy panel shows in the States that much. There's not really, you can't really think of any sort of US comedy panel shows, but we do it loads.
I know, they're up the yin yang. It's funny as well because funny enough, the ill-fated first US Top Gear pilot was a disastrous show, but it's where I met my wife, and so it was it had elements of success for me, but she was working at the time. on that show, in between series of Dancing with the Stars, which is their version of Strictly. And most of the people she worked with, certainly the senior people on Dancing, were British. And I was always really puzzled by that. They were ex-Strictly people usually. And I remember talking to one of them and going, how did you get this gig? Because surely there's plenty of people in Los Angeles who know how to make television. And she went, well, you'd say that, but not this kind of television. Big, kind of shiny floor, light entertainment, dancing show. No precedent at all. And so they happily went, get some Brits over here to just sort of lead the way. And of course, all these people who are used to having to rock up to a khaki office in Television Centre went, what, you want me to go and live in Los Angeles and make a TV show in Hollywood? Yeah, I think I can do that. Yeah. And then obviously you had to prize those jobs out of their cold dead hands. So most of them did it. I think some of them are still doing it because it's a sweet gig. But it's amazing how you think that the US sort of TV and film industry is all conquering and covers everything. But in fact, the sort of certain formats of show are not popular there or haven't worked there for whatever reason, and they also, the way that Saturday night is not a big night for telly. All their big event shows, which are now a thing, dancing and they've had American Idol and whatsoever. They go out on like a Tuesday,
right?
Really weird. Tuesday. That's a graveyard night for a big kind of everybody. It's live. Tune in, vote.
Yeah.
But the idea in the US of a show like that going out on a Saturday night is bizarre to them.
Strange.
So they're like, well, you should be doing something else on a Saturday night. Why are you not spending it with your friends or your family? You don't sit and watch TV or you go to the movies. So they find it. My wife moved over here going, why? Because she moved over and she started working on Strictly, and she's like, why does this show go out on a Saturday? That's just weird. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's the least weird thing I've ever heard. What are you talking about? Although, funny enough, seamlessly link back to my old job, but when we started making Top Gear and the BBC went, you're going to be on a Sunday night, we went, oh, for fuck's sake, what? That's like the worst thing possible, because we assumed we'd be on Thursday night, which is when Top Gear traditionally was, when it was a proper car show, and that was Top Gear slot, Thursday night. Why would we not be on that? And I don't know whose idea it was. It didn't come from our office. Someone in the Beeb went, no, Sunday night. And we went, Sunday night, that's like songs of praise and heartbeat. And, when you were a kid, it was like that feeling of, oh no, I haven't done my homework and I've got to go play school tomorrow morning. Sunday night's awful. And then only belatedly realised the genius of it, precisely because of that. It's like there's not a lot on if you don't like period dramas and
they've started to really push Sundays now. Like Sherlock was on Sundays, and now they always put like the big sort of drama stuff
and the
Sunday.
Results shows for the talent contests on the Saturday night.
Doctor Who's moved to Sunday.
Sunday's big, and it is because I guess we were not through any design of our own, but we were in the vanguard of that, of going, actually maybe Sunday night's a great slot. Everyone's in.
It's a good pick-me-up as well.
It's one last thing to enjoy before you sort of basically have to go, right, better go to bed then, work tomorrow, school tomorrow, whatever. I worked on a pilot for a football show. I don't know much about football, but there was a period when Top Gear started getting successful, and those of us who worked on it started getting asked if we would do like brainstorms or contribute to other programs that were trying to capture this essence of Top Gear, whatever that was supposed to be. And so I was part of a little team that was trying to develop this football program. I can't remember what it was going to be called, but it was specifically aimed at the Sunday night slot. It's a logical time to put a football show on because you're wrapping up all of the weekend's action. But I remember part of it was a slogan we came up, which was, the weekend's not over till we say so, or something like that.
Right.
And in a way that sort of encapsulated, in fact, what we were inadvertently doing with Top Gear. It was almost like, got one last bit of escapist, pure, silly entertainment before you basically then have to acknowledge that it's almost bedtime and you've got to go to do whatever you do on Monday morning. And it was quite fortuitous. But yeah, it's good. It's a good point, isn't it? Now everything cool is on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
It's good captive audience. People don't go out much on Sunday nights, so it's a nice time to put stuff on.
One thing, last thing I wanted to ask you about was about I really enjoy and you've sort of done it, I think, more in the Grand Tour than maybe you did in Top Gear, or maybe that's just me thinking that way, but not it not being true. But the little documentary sort of films.
Okay, yeah.
So like you did the one about Ford and Ferrari.
Yeah.
And recently there was the one about the F1 driver who suddenly escaped my...
Jim Clark.
Jim Clark.
Yeah.
How much involvement do you have with that sort of stuff?
Well, I used to be a bit involved. I mean, those were... certainly in the Grand Tour era, there was one of our producer-directors, a guy called Gavin Whitehead, who I was having a pint with last night, and he's very good at that sort of stuff because he's very into history, and so he loves getting his teeth into a big research project. So he used to lead the charge on those for the Grand Tour, and he would just basically be left alone to dive into research. You'd probably have a researcher to help out. And then it depends who was doing it, but like the Lancia Audi rally one. In fact, there was one of our producers, a guy called Stu Fenimore, did a lot of the work on that in terms of sort of finding, talking to the old rally people who worked on the teams and stuff like that. And so we would almost sort of leave them to it as a unit, probably Gavin and someone else, to just get on with it basically. And in that case, that Stu would be finding as much information as possible and then trying to distill it down and then feeding it into Jeremy. And so I'd work with Jeremy on the script side of things, distilling things down. But they were, what they didn't need was gags particularly. So they were much more serious, and they always went down really well. But I think they partly went down really well because, I mean, firstly, they don't sound immodest, but I think they were really well done. They always used to a lovely combination of sort of archive and then
they always felt like they had like an emotional hit to them as well.
They did, and that wasn't an accident, because I remember in the third series, the Grand Tour, what was it we were trying to do? We were going to do maybe instead of Jim Clark, originally we were going to do a broader sort of Lotus story. And there was something else we were going to do as well that would just, and they got rejected in the end because after a load of research had been done, we couldn't see that sort of emotional angle. And more likely, it's just that sometimes reality isn't structured the way you'd want it to be. The pivotal point in a sort of, end of the second act, or the end of the inciting incident at the end of the first act, or whatever it would be, wouldn't quite align with the way you'd want to structure it, and you would have to take too many liberties with truth to be able to give it that good story structure you wanted, and it would then you're actually not telling the story properly because you were trying to make it too dramatic. And in fact, the person who was brilliant at that, because he's a great storyteller, was our exec producer, Andy Willman. So he wrote the fundamentals of the Jim Clark film, for example. And it was his decision, assuming that a lot of people didn't know that much about Jim Clark. I think we kind of gave away that he'd been killed right at the top of the thing, which is, it's a kind of interesting technique, because you kind of weigh that up. Do you really want to do that? Is it a spoiler alert? But then it's kind of like, in fact, done right, I suppose it heightens the tragedy, because you're then recapping the life story of someone knowing inevitably that something bad is coming. It's a bit like that
Senna film.
Exactly.
You're going to get to the point where he crashes.
But that you're then sort of, your senses are on high alert in a way, because you're then like, oh God, and this and this, and this is, oh he really was brilliant, and oh my God, and he won that, and oh shit, this is going to be so tragic. Oh Christ, he has died now, and it's just, it can work really well. So we did, because we did the third series, we did quite a few of them, didn't we? We did Jim Clark, and we did that, James did that Porsche 917, which is one of our more serious films, and did Jeremy do one? Can't remember. But the Lancia Audi one was good, and that was Jeremy's idea, and that one did work in terms of, it's a little bit of not messing with reality, but just, highlighting certain elements. I think one of the ones that I was a bit like, are we okay with this, legally speaking, is we kind of labelled, what's he called? I can't remember the guy's name. The bloke who ran the Lancia team, we labelled him as a playboy.
Right.
And there's kind of evidence that he lived a good life and that, he was a sort of handsome Italian guy doing a really cool job and stuff like that. But, I think if he had objected, it would have been a bit awkward. God, I was happily married at that point. What are you saying?
No.
But, yeah, it just made sense in the story to kind of contrast the, the sensible, efficient, Germanic Audi team with this sort of slightly freewheeling Lancia side run by a playboy, and that kind of thing is a little bit tabloid, but fundamentally the story was correct, and we had a guy called John Davenport who used to run the Austin Rover rally team. He was a rally historian, and he kind of fact checked a lot for us, and so they were, that's the thing. They were legit, proper bits of storytelling. But that's it. What we did was we cherry picked the stories we told because they fitted the way that we wanted to do that sort of thing. And some stories just didn't work that way. So, I was more involved actually with the ones that we did on Top Gear, because we did the Lancia story and Peugeots, which is very silly, but did actually start as a proper history lesson. And what else did we do? Well, funnily enough, we did our own Senna story as well. Yeah,
I just thought that when I said it.
Which I can't remember where that came out.
Jeremy presented it, didn't he?
Yeah. And I forget whether that came out before the movie. Maybe it did.
I think it did, but I think it was like around the time. Because it must have been like an anniversary or something.
Yeah, maybe so. We got Lewis Hamilton driving one of Senna's old cars. I think that was the thing that made our film sort of a bit different to the movie. It wasn't just a sort of retelling of his life, it was also, we had a bit of specially shot stuff. But the funny thing about those was that they went down very well, but I think it's part of what made them work. What I was going to say was not just the fact that I hope we did a good job with them, but also that they were a good contrast to most of what the other stuff, what else was in the shows and the series. And if we'd done loads more of them, I think after a while people would have started going, can we have a few laughs now? Could someone just fall over or something?
Yeah.
This is all getting a bit serious. The contrast is what made those stand out. But they do, it was always heartening that they got a good reaction. It was almost like, that was us showing that we could do grown-up proper TV.
Yeah.
In the same way that, Jeremy used to make those documentaries about the war and stuff, and about the Victoria Cross. And it was a good way of him showing that actually he's a very good broadcaster and writer, and that he can do sensible stuff. It was almost, just like kind of, okay, kids, watch this, watch my chops, I can do this. And he could, they were great. I mean, he still gets people going, when are you going to make one of those military documentaries? When are you going to do more of that stuff? Which I think he's got, all the presenters are going to do little solo projects for Amazon in the coming year or so, because the Grand Tour is on sort of reduced output, and I think Jeremy's. Well, this is not a secret because he's written about it already. He's going to make this show about his farm that he's bought and the struggles of running a farm, and I think that has the potential to show a different side to him as well. Again, able to impart interesting information in a really watchable way without going, oh no, I've fallen in the slurry pit again. I think so. I don't know. I mean, he may decide that's funnier and better, but he's as you sort of probably tell, there's a sort of cartoonish oaf persona that we played on TV. He's a very, very clever bloke, and he is very able to do a lot of different things.
But I think even just watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it was like it just sort of affirmed that he's a really good presenter. Yeah. And like he could do, and obviously he was being, a bit Clarkson-esque as he always is, but he could do it properly. And
we got wind that this was on the cards, and then it was made official. And I think we already knew at this point it was going to happen, and we were laughing in the office about it because we were like, I mean, you've seen on Top Gear in the Grand Tour, Jeremy's not the most patient man. What are you doing? Why? No, James, stop explaining this. I've lost interest already. I'm going. I'm just going over there. You know, we were like, what is he going to do on Millionaire? And you go, right, is that your final answer? Oh, just look, it's B. I'm just going to tell you because I'm bored of listening to you. We were thinking he's never going to be able to do that. He'll just be so bored sitting there going, come on. And he does do a bit of that. And I think he sort of harnesses his natural inclination. But at the same time, there's two things. One is that I think he's always had this semi-secret ambition to be a game show host. I think he's always something he's wanted to do, just to sort of see if he could do it. Because a couple of times he tried to introduce sort of game show elements into Top Gear and the Grand Tour, and it was pretty unsuccessful. We never broadcast them. But it's always something I think he's just wanted to have a crack at. And also, he's just a really big fan of telly. And he loves the simplicity of Millionaire, that it's just asking someone questions, not really much else to it. And yet it manages to be very tense, and it manages to be very human, because you start rooting for the people you like and all this. And every time he films it, you know, he's come back to the Grand Tour office, and you know, he'd be sort of bubbling with excitement. Like, oh, you've got to see it. There's this brilliant guy. He's absolutely amazing. And I was like, I thought he was going. You know, he's like sort of babbling with excitement. You go, it's really bizarre. I never thought you'd be so jazzed up about. But yeah, he genuinely loves doing it, and I think, if I'm honest, more surprising, he's genuinely really good at it. I remember watching the first show, and everyone in the office was like, oh my God, he's done that. That's fair play to him. He's really good at it. Really good at it. And it's sort of, that's the thing. He is just one of those people who is, because he's smart and because he puts effort in, he's got, you know, a good work ethic. He's not a phone-it-in merchant. He's the exact opposite, which makes him quite tiring to work with sometimes, because you can't ever get away with shoddiness. He'll spot it straight away. But why is that? Not sure. You know, researchers with the fear in their eyes going, oh God, he's picked up on the one bit in this whole 200-page document where there's like a little bit of vague detail. I don't understand why. We'll go and check that. Well, go now then. Go check. I want to know. And you know, there's that sort of. He's very detailed kind of attention to detail sort of bloke, and sweats the details in terms of scripts and edits and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's no surprise that he just went, I'm going to put my mind to this, and I'm going to be the best Millionaire host I can be. And then he is, and he's good at it. They're doing more this year. Probably shouldn't have told you that. I don't think it's a massive secret, but they're doing a load more quite soon. So yeah, that's Jeremy for you. He's good at stuff. That's why he's on telly quite a lot. It's not like he's just a chancer who's turned up and been given a job. He works hard at it. They all do, you know. All three of them. They're there for a reason. They're very good at what they do. Probably don't get enough credit for, because people think that they're sort of cartoon idiots. Yeah. And they're good at playing those parts, but those three very bright blokes. Hammond gets a raw deal because he is always made to look stupid on TV. And what's happened in recent years is that Richard has sort of achieved peace with this, realised it's going to happen, and will now just happily play the idiot. Right. But he's not a dummy at all. Yeah. Far from it. He's a very bright bloke as well. And it's just that he's sort of realised, in a way that I think it took James longer to get to the point where he's just like, you want me to be slightly boring and pedantic at this point, don't you? And, you know, Jeremy be going, yes, James, that's the whole point. You're being boring so that it justifies me driving over your foot or whatever. And James, you're like, right, okay. Yeah. Or Richard just be like, what, you want me to fall down over there? Okay, yeah, I can probably do that. Yeah, what, you want me to not understand how, like, scissors work? And he's just happy to do it because it's what's required. At this stage in their careers, with the three of them together on the Grand Tour, it's kind of, again, to use a band analogy, they are basically the Rolling Stones, just cranking out the hits in a stadium. Yeah. You know, that's why that, again, to mention that thing in the army training base, probably didn't work for a lot of people, is because they're at the stage in their careers where people are just going, just do the hits. Yeah. Just do the hits. Don't be smart arse with us. Just play the ones we like. And so there's a little element of that, I think. And Richard's just like, give the people what they want.
There's that, I don't know if you heard it on the because you mentioned you listened to Adam Buxton sometimes, but Adam Buxton said there's like a story, I think, about Neil Young where he was playing a gig in London and he plays like a whole album, and then goes off, and the crowd are getting increasingly sort of restless and bored, and then he goes off stage, comes back on and says, here's one you've heard before, and everyone cheers, and then he starts the whole album again from starts like the whole
Oh right, I was thinking of a different story. Is it the Bob Dylan story? You know, infamously when he went electric in the 60s, a gig in Manchester, I think, wasn't it? And someone shouted Judas at him. But I thought there was a sort of parallel story of another artist, and maybe not Neil Young, someone else, where someone in the audience basically shouted sort of traitor at them, sort of stormed the stage or something. It's like, just calm down, go to the bar, take a deep breath, come back. It's okay, it's just music.
So there you have it, Richard Porter. My thanks to Richard for taking part in the show, and congratulations to him as he has the honour of being the first of my podcast guests to have a two-parter. So, I mean, you know, I say congratulations. Probably it's not that big of a deal for a man that works on the kind of massive shows that he does. But hey, thank you again to him, and thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me over this year for another 10 episodes. My apologies for them being so sort of sporadic in terms of how they've come out. I keep endeavouring to make this a more consistent affair, and hopefully as the podcast continues, we can make sure that it is more of a consistent affair. But thank you for sticking with me, and I hope you have enjoyed this year of podcasts. I will be back soon in the new year for more interesting conversations with interesting individuals. So until next time, have a wonderful holiday season of whatever variety, denomination you choose to partake in, and have a fantastic new year. And until next time, I've been James Albarn, and this is The Last Line.